Good evening, Vanchika. Yes, I'm Rahul Saha, and in the last class we had discussed about the various types of, you can say, pollination events. I had given you the flowchart table, right? The of pollination describing self-pollination and cross-pollination. Today we'll be continuing our discussion regarding that. So we had talked about the self-pollination, the autogamy. Then we had talked about heteronogamy, that is when the flower or the pollen from one flower are deposited on the stigma of another flower, born on the same plant. That is, it will produce genetically alike, right, flowers. That is your heteronogamy. And then what happens is, I had also explained to you the specificities regarding the homogamy, like it is the condition in which the anthers and stigmas in bisexual flowers they attain maturity at the same time. Then we have talked about the cleistogamy. Okay, so today we will be talking about the chasmogamous flowers and then coming on to the cross pollination events. Okay, so when we talk about chasmogamy, so in chasmogamous flowers, the chasmogamous flowers are with exposed anthers and stigma. The chasmogamous flowers are always with exposed anthers and stigma. Okay. Now, in a normal flower which opens and exposes the anthers and stigma, complete autogamy becomes really rare. It becomes a really rare event, and autogamy in such flowers requires what? It will require synchrony in pollen release and stigma receptivity. If that only happens, then only autogamy, you can even think of autogamy, because it is the transference of pollen grains from the anther of a flower to the stigma of the same flower, okay, which must be again a bisexual flower, but it really decreases if the flowers have exposed anthers and stigma. You increase the probability or susceptibility towards the cross pollination event, or at least you will be having heteronogametic events, right? So for autogamy in such flowers, the anthers and stigma must also, okay, first of all, in order for autogamy to happen, two criteria must be fulfilled. That is, it depends on pollen grain release and stigma sensitivity. Then the flowers, anthers and stigma of that flower, in those kinds of flowers, the anthers and stigma should be very close to each other. The anthers and stigma should lie in close, I can say, captivity in order for autogamy to occur. Now we'll switch our attention to, you can say, cross pollination events. Okay, now cross pollination, when we come to cross pollination, so cross pollination, I can call it also xenogamy, or I can call it allogamy also. There are various synonyms. We call it xenogamy, allogamy. So you might remember the allosomes are known as the sex chromosomes, right? So allogamy. So this is known as cross fertilization, because it will lead to, you can say, change of flowers altogether. Okay. So cross pollination, if you want to divide, so if you want to define here properly, so it can be defined as the migration of pollen grains of pollen grains. From one flower to the stigma of a genetically different flower, means different species, genetically different flower. That is the real sense of it becoming, you can say, cross-pollination event, right? So this will lead to what? The consequence of this will be what? If this happens, what will happen is you will have genetic recombination in the long run, right? You will be having more and more of different, you can say, genes to be mixed together. Those different genes will come to the mixing part, right? Those different genes will come to mixing, and the genetic mixing will lead to the genetic mixing will lead to more crossing over events. Okay, crossing over events, which is also known as genetic recombination, or you can say more and more homologous recombination will then cause more and more variation to develop. Right, homologous recombination will in the end occur in meiosis, and if you have extremely diverse gene pool, means you are doing what? You are mixing up two various gene pools here. One gene pool for one flower, one gene pool from another flower. So that is what you should be doing. Okay, that you should be targeting that in order to cause more and more rapid evolution, and more chances are then bestowed upon that specific flower to undergo natural selection. Okay. So that is what the, you can say, consequence or the ramification of this entire cross pollination is, and that is why it is more important, you can say. Okay. So this is performed with also the help of, you can say, external abiotic and also biotic agencies, which we have already talked about in the last class during the flow chart that I had given to you. In case of abiotic factors, okay, it will lead to the formation of, or it would lead to anemophily, that via wind it may happen. It may happen via hydrophily, via, you can say, water. It can occur via any biotic agencies. These will be the abiotic ones. The biotic will be, the living agencies will be entomophily, insects, then chiropterophily, bats, then it could be malacophily, snails and slugs. Okay. Then it could be ornithophily. Okay. So then we will be coming on to each one in detail. Number one is the anemophily. It is the wind pollinated plants. Okay, for the cross pollination. So in case of anemophily, you need to know some examples too. Okay. So anemophily means there will be some anemophilous plants. Okay. So anemophilous flowers, I should be saying. So what happens is, wind pollinated plants are coconut palm, date palm, right? Then you have cannabis, which we talked about in the chapter 8. We have endocannabinoid receptors, okay, in our central nervous system and our peripheral nervous system. Okay, that again is a link between the gut and brain, the gut-brain axis. And then we have, you can say, rice, then wheat, then sugarcane. Various examples are there. Sugarcane. Then you also have, you can say, Z maize or maize plant. Okay. That scientific name is Z maize. Okay. So these are the plants which exhibit the anemophilic property. And why? Why do they favor anemophily? Okay. So what they do is they exhibit the following characteristics that really favor wind pollination, because we need to know why does wind pollination happen also. Why does it favor it? Why is it the preferable choice for these specific line of plants, right? So the first function is wind pollinated flowers are small sized and not very showy. They do not have too much, you can say, branches and all coming out, too many, you can say, huge puffed up, you can say the periphery of the flower is not too puffed up, so they are quite small. Okay, so the wind pollinated flowers are quite small in size. Then they are devoid of, because they are wind pollinated, so they are not, you can say, dependent or reliant on any kind of scent or nectar and all, because they are not to be pollinated by insects, so the evolution doesn't need it. So they are devoid of specific scent, fragrance, you can call it, or nectar, okay, or any other special characteristics, because they are directly dependent on, you can say, wind. One more thing, if you are directly dependent on wind, you need to be very witty. Witty in the sense you need to produce a lot of, you can say, pollens, so that the probability or the chances they increase, they can be, you can say, spiked rapidly, right? They take a sudden spike because there will be more and more pollen grains which will be formed, so that will eventually cause the increase in the probability of them landing on some of the other flowers, right? So they'll produce a large quantity, you can say, of dusty pollen. They produce a large quantity of pollen. Okay. Then the pollen grains are dry and unwettable, okay, because they need to be carried through the wind, so they need to stay light, otherwise they land there only at a very short distance. They will be landing, and that will be completely denying the purpose, right? It will be negating the purpose of wind pollination. So the pollens are, or for the pollen grains are dry and unwettable. They do not become wet easily. Okay, and the movement of the pollen grain will be again due to wind, so it will be completely non-directional and it will go large distances. So the movement of the pollen grain is non-directional. Okay, and may be taken to long distances. Then the anemophilous plants, right? They grow in large groups to ensure more chances, more probability of pollination. Okay, the anemophilous plants. They grow in, you can say, large groups. Then you can say in some deciduous anemophilous trees like bombax, the flowers appear before the leaves even get the chance to appear. Okay, and in plants like grasses and wheat, a special example. Okay, anthers are versatile. Versatile means anthers are said to be versatile. Now, versatile means which swings freely with the help of a slight breeze. Okay, swings freely due to slight breeze, or on account of slight breeze. That's all that they need. They'll keep on, you can say, swirling around so that they can catch. They're able to get hold to new and new pollen grains. So that is what they'll do. Again, that will increase the susceptibility towards catching, right? Towards the, you can say, recruitment of pollen grains, because pollen grains are all over the wind. It's unidirect. It is non-directional. You can say it doesn't come from one single direction, so it is not unidirectional. So if you keep on swinging, you increase your probability of getting hold onto or getting your grip onto some of the pollen grains which are pervasive in the wind or which may be prevalent in the wind at that point in time, right? Now, in order to catch the pollen grains, what happens is the stigmas become sticky. In order to increase the probability of catching the pollen grains, the stigmas become, you can say, sticky. Okay, then hairy, then feathery, right? Or it can be branched also. Okay, all these things will increase the probability of catching or holding on to pollen grains. And some pollinated flowers, like you can say Urtica, they show an explosive mechanism. Explosive mechanism means by which the anther bursts and it will release all of a sudden in air a large amount of pollens. Okay. Again, wind pollinated flowers, they bear well exposed stamens. Well exposed stamens, so that they can be easily dispersed by wind currents. That is the reason of exposed stamens. Okay. Anemophilous flowers usually bear, you can say, a single ovule in each ovary. Okay, that is the last characteristic. Now we come to the hydrophily. So pollination brought about, you can say, hydrophily. So the pollination brought about through the agency of water, right? Hydro means water. In plants, especially submerged plants, is termed as hydrophily. Submerged plants. So pollination brought about through the agency of water. Okay, many people will write this definition only, but it is not a complete definition. You have to include water in plants. Okay, this especially will get you half mark more. Till this part, if you write, you will get 2.5. But especially if you write, you will get 3. Or if the question is of 2 marks, you will get complete 2 marks. So till this part, you may get 1.5 only. Right? Especially submerged plants. Especially submerged plants. That is termed as, or that is known as or referred to as hydrophily. So this has been reported only in about 30 genera. Mostly all are monocotyledons. Okay, monocotyledons, 30 genera only. Okay. So water helps in the movement of male gametes in case of what? In case of algae, in case of our bryophytes, okay, amphibians they are known as, right? Then in case of pteridophytes. So if you talk about example, right, you have hydrilla, you have zostera, you have vallisneria. So these are some of the examples of the water pollinated plants. Then one more thing, one more classification is there. Under hydrophily means hydrophily can further be divided into two types. One is epihydrogamous, another is hypohydrogamous. Okay. Number one is hypohydrogamous. Now in hypohydrogamous type what happens is the pollination takes place below the surface of water. Hypohydro, below. Hypotension means low blood pressure. Hypo means below. Hydro means water. So below the surface of water. Pollination takes place below the surface of water. Okay, that is known as hypohydrogamous. Okay. Now, what you have is as an example is zostera. Okay, zostera is the prime example here. So in zostera, what happens is it's a submerged marine plant which bears submerged marine plant which is known to bear elongated 2500 millimeter long needle-like and largest sized pollen grains, that too without an XII. Very, very important, means no sporopollen, right? Needle-like pollen grain, that too without an XII. Very, very important for neat preparation, right? So when they reach the stigma, what happens is they coil around it and then they germinate. They coil around it and then germinate. That is how the entire process happens. Now pollen grains have the same specific gravity as that of water. So you might be aware of specific gravity when you have learned about learned the physical chemistry chapter, right, in class 11th. So might be knowing that specific gravity is a unitless quantity. It is a unitless quantity, specific gravity. So when we compare specific gravity, right, so what do we do? That is the pressure, you can say the density, okay, of specific gravity. If you see the density of object upon the density of water, so it will be closed out. Like suppose it is, you can say density of object is 12 gram per ml. So both will get cancelled. I'll show you how. Just revise little bit of chemistry. Then H2O is 1 gram per ml. Okay, when both will get cancelled out, what you will get is 12 as a result. Okay, so that's why I called it a unitless quantity, right? So this one has same specific gravity as that of water. Okay, always know that. So at 0 degree, the water's specific gravity is, you can say, 1.70 maximally. So that is there. So you have the entire chart also. If you want to see of specific gravity, then I can show it to you in later classes, right? So the thing is, we will be coming on to another plant or another type of pollination, that is epihydrogamous type. Okay, epihydrogamous. Under hydrophily. This means what? Epi means above, like epithalamus. This is a part of diencephalon. If you study nervous system in detail, you will be knowing epithalamus, then thalamus, then hypothalamus. These three are the parts of the diencephalon in the brain, right? So epithalamus means pollination occurs above the surface of water. Here pollination, epi means above hydro, water. So pollination occurs above the surface of water. Okay. So one of the examples that I had given you there was of Zostera, and one more example I had given you was of Vallisneria. So this Vallisneria is a great example, which is a tape grass. Okay. This Vallisneria is a tape grass. Is a great exemplar of epihydrogamous type, right? This is a dioecious plant having strap-shaped leaves that grow in the mud at the bottom of any kind of stagnant water, right? Stagnant water source. The male flowers are borne, you can say, low down amongst the radical leaves on short-stalked, you can say, spadix inflorescence type. And from this spadix, individual male flowers, they get detached, and then what they do is they finally float freely on water surface. Okay, that is from the male side. Meanwhile, what happens is the stalk bearing the female flower, it straightens up, okay, and then takes the, you can say, the female flower to the surface. Here the main, you can say, mechanism will take place. What happens is the male flowers open on the surface with 3 perianth leaves, widely exposing the 2 stamens vertically. Okay, then 2 of the perianth leaves, what happens is they come in contact with water surface, and the third smaller tepal remains upwardly curved to act as a sail, right, like a voyage. And some of the male flowers are drawn into the depression of water surface surrounding the female flowers. Then what happens is the anthers burst and sticky pollens, they are released, and after they are released, they attach, or they get attached to the stigma. Okay, and after the pollination event becomes over, the long stalk of female flower coils and brings it back to the lower level of water where the fruit is formed. So this is the entire mechanism, but the mechanism won't be asked in board examination. I just explained the mechanism to you for your neat preparation. So the interesting characters when we talk about pertaining to the hydrophilous plants are, okay, the criteria or characters or characteristics of hydrophilous plants are, you can say, the pollen grains are light, but they are covered with wax, okay, so that the water cannot extremely make them wet, okay, and produced in large number. Large number. Okay. Number two is the stigma is sticky yet unwettable. Is sticky but unwettable. Number three, the again the since it is hydrophilic or hydrophily is happening, what happens is the fragrance or the scent and nectar are absent. Okay. Then flowers are small in size. Okay, that is there. Flowers are small in size. Then what you have is sepals, petals or perianth. If they are present are unwettable. Okay. Why? Because they do contain waxy coating. Okay. Sepals, petals, perianth are unwettable due to waxy coating. Okay. Now we come to the zoophily, means many animals they act as pollen agents, biotic components. So bees, the flies, the beetles, the ants, the wasps, moths, birds, right, hummingbirds and all, bats are various examples of, you can say, zoophily. So insects, particularly bees, are dominating biotic pollen agents, right? But that's why we will study entomophily here. And if you study the branch where you learn about only insects, that branch is known as entomology, right? So large-sized animals also, like primates, like lemurs, arboreals, like tree-dwelling, you can say rodents, reptiles, like gecko, lizard, garden lizards can also act as, you can say, pollinating agents. Okay. So if you talk about zoophily, then the first one that comes into my mind is entomophily, the most important. Means the insect pollinated flowers, entomophilous flowers, it will be happening via the insect. So what are the characteristics that must be present, okay, in the entomophilous flowers? The characteristics in entomophilous flowers. So first characteristic is the insect pollinated flowers must have a specific fragrance in order for the insect to be attracted, right? They must have a very attractive enamoring fragrance. So fragrance must be present. Okay, and also they should be able to omit scent properly or omit fragrance properly. Okay, why? Then it will be omitted by Graham's law of diffusion. You must have read in chemistry, right? So you have jasmine, you have cestrum. So what happens is they omit proper smell, and on the other hand, okay, you have something known as rafflesia also, which gives out obnoxious, means intolerable, repelling odor. That is obnoxious odor. Okay, but that obnoxious odor again is great for specific flies. Some flies are attracted by obnoxious odor. You will think that why obnoxious odor is being transmitted, in order to specifically bring on those flies which will bring on those selected pollen grains. So that is again a great strategy by evolution and nature. So most of the night blooming flowers, if you talk about, they are also really fragrant, because when the color vision fails, mostly at night, the scent is particularly or greatly useful in directly the insects or in directing the insects towards the flowers. Okay, so the night blooming flowers, you can call them, they do possess prolific fragrance emitting property. Okay. Now what happens is, one more thing, the insect pollinated flowers are beautifully colored. You might have seen Hibiscus rosa sinensis. Point number 2. They are beautifully colored. Beautifully colored, like hibiscus. Okay. In flowers, mostly petals are brightly colored, you can see. Okay. Sometimes when flowers themselves are not conspicuous, other parts may become colored, and that is again a great, you can say, attraction for the insect, right? They'll attract the insects, and you can say increase the probability or susceptibility towards getting successfully pollinated. Then one more thing, the entomophilous flowers, they will also contain the nectariferous glands. Nectariferous glands. Now these produce nectar, and nectar is great for feeding the visiting insect. It is like a food, right? It is like a dining hall, right? A restaurant where you are presenting a specific dish. So they produce nectar to be fed to the visiting insect. Okay. So nectariferous glands are present at such positions on floral parts which will encounter the anthers and stigma and increase the probability of the insect to get the nectar, and when it feeds upon the nectar, it will, you can say, spend more time on the stigma and then release the pollen grain, right? So in plants like viola, the markings on petals, the nectar guides are present which guide the insects to the source of nectar also. Okay. In entomophilous plants, the pollen grains become very, very sticky. I had told you they have a specific, you can say, layer of sticky material on top of this sporopollen, that is known as the pollen kit, right? The pollen kit is present on the XII. The pollen grains are consequently very, very sticky. They could be spiny also, okay, so that they may easily get attached to the body of the visiting insects, right? And the stigmas also, they become sticky in order to catch the pollen grains which are stuck to the insect, right? And flowers become more conspicuous by grouping. That also happens in case of sunflower. Okay. In plants like, you can say, papaver, okay, what happens is, on genus Rosa also, what happens is you have edible pollen grains, very, very unique, edible pollen grains. So some of the pollen grains stick to the body of the insects while feeding on the edible pollen grain. So while the insect, this is a great, great strategy, right? So if you explain this sentence, so this is the one straight definition. If you elaborate it, when the insect directly is feeding upon the, you can say, pollen grain, what happens is some of the pollen grains may get stuck to his entire body, and that has done the work, that has completed the job. You have achieved that milestone of making the pollen grains stick to the body of the insect. Thereby when the insect will fly and land on the stigma of any other plant, it will transmit or transfer the pollen grains which was carried from this specific plant on which the insect was feeding, right? So that is how this entire thing goes on. In orchid, okay, the shape and color of petals is like a female wasp. So what happens is, this is a kind of mimicry, you can say. So the male wasps, they mistakenly recognize the flowers as, you can say, or for a female wasp and tries to copulate, and this results in the pollination of the flowers because they will transfer the pollen grains which they were carrying from some other plants, or they will take the pollen grains away from this and go for another plant, another orchid, and try to copulate, and then it will go for the, or it will cause the cross pollination event. Okay, so these all the things, they keep on happening in yucca moth. Okay, so what happens is yucca moth bores a hole in the ovary of yucca flower. Very, very great concept this is. Yucca moth bores a hole in the ovary of yucca flower. A great example I'm giving you. So what happens is it lays its eggs in it. Okay, lays its eggs in it, and then it collects pollens from several flowers and pushes the whole pollen down the hollow end of the stigma. Then what happens is fertilization will eventually take place, and which will result into the development of seeds. Now the larvae which are produced, they will feed on the developing seeds, and some seeds remain unconsumed, okay, by chance, because seeds are so many in number, to propagate the eventual species. So what happens is the moth cannot survive without yucca flowers, and yucca fails to reproduce sexually without the moth. So this is like an obligatory association. You can call it a symbiotic relationship also here, right? Plus plus, obligatory, that too, right? So it is a mutualism, you can call it, not, you can say, the facultative one. It is mutualism, right? Obligatory. Okay. So these are the main examples when we talk about the entomophily. Now we can come on to the next type, that is known as the ornithophily. Okay, bird pollinated. So the branch that deals with birds is known as ornithology. Okay, so ornithophilous bird pollinated flowers. Ornithophily. Bird pollinated flowers will be your ornithophilous. Okay. Now they differ in number of respects from the entomophilous flowers. Both come under the category of, you can say, zoophily, but the flowers are generally scentless here. Birds are not to be enamored by a scent. The flowers are generally completely scentless, fragrantless or fragranceless. Then the flowers are large in size, so the birds can sit. Flowers are large in size. Birds can sit on them. They are also beautifully colored with color contrast, so that they produce the common colors which are liked by birds. So the flowers have beautifully colored with great color contrast. Beautifully. With color contrast. Okay. Now what happens is the colors, okay, the parrot color or pure blue color cannot be easily distinguished by insects except honeybees. So the insects cannot do it, but the birds can. Okay. So another interesting character in the provision of a copious and, you can say, mucilaginous nectar is that the nectar is more important to a bird as a drink than food. Very, very important point this is. The pollens are again sticky and adhere to the body of the bird. Okay, sticky pollen grains. Then what happens is, if you talk about hummingbird only, so hummingbird can consume half its body weight of nectar in one single day only. Now vivid colors attract the birds from, you can say, really long distances. So it has been reported that 100 species of Australian plants are completely reliant on birds and are bird pollinated. Okay, some examples of bird pollinated plants in Australia are coral tree. You can say coral tree, then bottle brush, etc. Right? So then we'll come on to next one, which is known as chirophyll, okay, or chiropterophyll. That is bat pollination. So chiropterophyll or chiropterophilous flowers, that is pollination by bat pollination. Bats are the mammals, right? So the flowers of, you can say, Durio and Anthocephalus, also Hindi known as kadam, right? Durio, Anthocephalus. They are pollinated by bats. They are chiropterophilous flowers. Now the bats, what they do is they hold on to the freely exposed large and relatively tough flower which open in the evening or night. Now what happens is the bats are nocturnal animals, we all know that, and they transport pollen over long distances. Long distances means over 30 kilometers. You will be amazed to know they can transport or dispose pollens over 30 kilometers of distances. Okay, now they usually give off a strong, very strong scent, okay, like that of rotting fruits. Now bats also feed on the, you can say, copious nectar. Okay, they also feed on the copious amount of nectar or the abundant amount of nectar produced. Okay, and pollen which is plenty as compared to bird pollinated flowers. Okay, so in flowers of, you can say, baobab tree, number of stamens ranges from 1500. Okay, baobab tree, okay, it is also known as Adansonia. Okay, so the stamens ranges from 1500 to 2000 in order to produce pollen in large, extremely large numbers. That is how the requirement of, you can say, bat pollinating, you can say, flowers are for them to be pollinated by bats, right? Now if we talk about the adaptations, okay, the adaptations or the outbreeding devices or the contrivances promoting cross pollination, they are what? So the next heading is adaptation / outbreeding devices / contrivances promoting cross pollination. Cross pollination. Now, number one is decliny. Decliny means unisexuality. Means the flowers are completely unisexual. Are completely unisexual. Okay, means they have only one sex, like papaya, mulberry. If you have two sexes, if you are bisexual in nature, you will increase your probability towards going for self pollination only because you have two sexes. So you don't need to search any other plant. But the evolution will search for any other plant. You will search for any other plant if you want to increase the, or you want to proliferate your own species, and if you are then unisexual, then you will be dependent on cross pollination, right? You will be reliant on cross pollination. That's why it will increase the demand for cross pollination. Okay, so thus they will be promoting the event of cross pollination only because self pollination is not an option which is open for these kinds of plants. Okay, next up is the dichogamy. Number 2, dichogamy. So in bisexual flowers, what happens is the anthers and stigma mature at different times. Again, it will reduce the probability of self-fertilization. The anthers and stigma. It is not like homogamy where they mature at the same time. Mature at different times. Thus reducing the probability of self-fertilization. Right? Now again, dichogamy is of 2 types. One is protandry, one is protogeny. Okay. Protandry and then protogeny. Now if we talk about protandry, in protandry the anthers mature first. The anthers mature first. Okay, and what happens is the stigma of the same flower is never receptive at that point in time. Okay, the example is sunflower, cotton, means the stigmas have not matured till that point in time. So sunflower, cotton. Then when we come or talk about protogeny, in protogeny what happens is the stigma of the carpel, it matures earlier than the anthers of the same flower. Stigma of the carpel, it matures earlier. Okay, matures earlier than the anther of the same plant, just the opposite of protandry. The same plant. Again, the anther will not be releasing the pollen grains when the stigma is extremely receptive, and thereby it will reduce the probability. It will reduce the probability of the self-pollination event to take place, right? So the examples are ranunculus, you can say mirabilis jalapa, that is the 4 o'clock plant. Okay, we call it mirabilis jalapa, that is the 4 o'clock plant. So they prefer protogeny, right? So like this, many types of adaptations are present. So in the next class we will be talking about the rest of the adaptations, and then we will be switching on to post-pollination events. Okay, we will be switching on to the development of endosperm, the embryo development. Okay, in the next class. So wish you a very, very happy Diwali. Okay, no problem, Tarun. Enjoy your Diwali, be safe and sound, and keep back stronger with the zeal of scoring more and more marks in the board examination. Okay then, thanks a lot. Let's meet you in the next class.